United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all. All right, thanks everyone. We have great attendance here tonight. Let's get through some of the preliminaries, then we'll get into the meat of the agenda tonight. We actually have a quorum tonight. So the last meeting where we had a quorum was the September 9th meeting, and the minutes were shared earlier today. Hopefully all had a chance to check those out. This time I'd like to see if we can get a motion and a second to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Nay? No nays. Okay, so those are approved. Tammy, I guess I turned to you for a procedural question. I guess there's really nothing, no action item for us to take on either the October 14th or November 9th notes, because they aren't minutes per se, but if there is, then we'll take action.
Yes, there's no action to confirm. So I provided the October 14th meeting notes for your review. So within there is a link to the video, not only the video to that particular meeting, because we did have a lot of resident discussion at that meeting, particularly on Fenimore Woods, but there was also a meeting link that I provided to the special Board of Commissioners meeting about the capital budget on September 30th. So I gave that in the body of the message, of course, today to you. And then as far as the special meeting from November 9th, we're still working on putting the, I'll call it the so-called high-level transcript that, thank goodness, Mary took such copious notes on at that meeting. So we're working on putting those together, just working in a little bit of a delay because it was like 6 pages of notes we had to get through and then, kind of put some sense to them. And I'll have those out to you guys for the next meeting. So at least you have a high level summary of what happened. I mean, we can talk about a high level summary, obviously, tonight, and, as we should. But as far as more of the details about the attendees and things like that will be included in those notes later on.
That's great. Thanks, Tammy. And thanks, Mary, for pinch hitting for me.
Oh, no problem.
Sorry you wound up being such a scrivener, but thank you. I'm going to go out of order a little bit on the agenda and turn it over for a Board of Commissioners report and perhaps a comment or two from Commissioner Farhi first tonight. So, Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I appreciate you doing this. The real reason why I wanted this is before Tammy goes on to her spiel, I want to give her a shout out for everything that she's done in this past month. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get to the Halloween at the Township. Unfortunately, I think my son has aged out of it, but that is always a fun time. But just a couple things. Tammy, what you were doing with Fenimore Woods is absolutely amazing. It is encompassing to the community. It was a great meeting. We're really making progress, and I really want to say thank you. It's not my ward, but it is a major parks thing. It's important to a lot of people, and thank you. The other thing I want to say is thank you very much personally for joining me when we met with Reverend Howard. We were on 860 WWDB on Monday. And that was just a terrific time to talk about Emlyn Tunnel. And we had a bunch of call-ins, Superintendent Flanagan, and also Marty Costello. Marty Costello, who, as we know, is a big part of the American Legion and Radner and Radner's history. And that just leads me into my next point, saying to Marty, thank you, and to the school board. Marty was at the Veterans Day outside of the middle school, and that was a wonderful, absolutely wonderful ceremony hosted by Marty as well as John Raschuti. We had some amazing speeches, and it's always important that we do that. And finally, my wife dropped off the present to the Santa's delivery, so I am super excited for that. And that's pretty much it. I know, Bill, you have some iced coffee. I have a glass of wine, so I am giving you a toast, Tammy, for everything that you've done. I'm not going to drink this because we're not, it's probably a no-no, and it's got to age a little bit too. But thank you. Thank you very much. You're doing a great job. And from everyone that has talks to me about the parks and the and rec and the community development, thank you very much. And great job.
Thank you, Commissioner Farhi. I really appreciate that. And I guess we're only going to be delivering one gift, not two, to your house. I assume your
Yeah.
order is too cool for. No?
Yeah, a little too cool.
Okay, gotcha.
Thank you, Commissioner. Certainly, I'll raise my glass of water and toast that as well. Tammy, thanks again. And Commissioner Farhi summed it up very well. Commissioner, anything else to report from BOC?
No, I mean that's really it. I think the bulk of everything is going into Fenimore at this point, and these meetings are great. And the more we flesh stuff out, the more we'll be able to encompass all the views. You know, it can't be all things to all people, as we say at the meeting, but listening and finding the right path, I think, is really where we're headed, and that's the Tammy's leadership, as well as Steve Norsini and Ricky Foster, the different people that are going to really, it's not a one-person job. Parks, you guys are doing a great job, the Parks Committee, but also when we look at public works and engineering, it's, you know, it takes a village, as I say.
Thanks, Commissioner. Just one thing, which I'll put under the category of potential preservation of open space. It's my understanding that the village on Roberts Road, the price has significantly been reduced, and they might be calling all bids in by January. I don't know if that's something that BOC would be looking at, but it'd be a wonderful opportunity to preserve space if that was something the board could do.
I am always looking to preserve as much open space as possible. So once we flesh that out, hopefully our township manager as well as the board can take a look at it, and input from you to the board saying that, hey, can we do something with that? That's always important as well. So,
okay,
great.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go back to our normal order and turn it over to Tammy now for the Parks and Rec update, please.
Okay, just to talk a little bit, I don't want to go too far back into October. I know we talked about a lot of things going on last month, but really October as a whole and November are very, very busy and have been loaded with a lot of programming. You know, we're right now at the point where we're transitioning from a lot of really popular outdoor stuff, not only just the programming that our department is running, but also all of the field scheduling, everything. Now everything is transitioning to indoors. So we have a lot of programming picking up at Radner Activity Center. We're also coordinating heavily with Radner Youth Basketball, which once again this year has incredible numbers in terms of registration. So we've been working very heartily with Bob Nicholas throughout that process, and then balancing not only all of the programming that we have as a department going on in the facility, but also the rentals. So a lot of folks are renting the facility for birthday parties, basketball teams, indoor soccer teams, you name it. So we're you know, coordinating heavily there. And as far as our events in October, whenever we had our meeting last, we were in the process of rescheduling the Fall Harvest event, which had returned in person. So that was rescheduled for October 17th and was an amazing success at the Willows. I was a little nervous the next morning just because of the amount of rain that came down on Friday and Saturday. But I think we were able to manage the Willows property as best as we could. And then, of course, Public Works got to work after the event, you know, making sure areas were seeded and things were cleaned up appropriately because we had probably what looks to be about 4,000 people in attendance. So we had 20 plus vendors and community businesses attend. We had all kinds of activities, of course, the tractor rides over into the pumpkin patch over in Skunk Hollow, and the bull ride. We had an outdoor maze. We had all kinds of fun things for folks to enjoy. Of course, the gem mining is always a big hit as well. And it was nonstop with people from beginning to end. As a matter of fact, this is an event where people show up a half an hour ahead before the event even starts. So we always know we have to be on our toes and ready. So it was great to have that back and have it back and in person. Shortly was followed by our trick or treat at the Township building, which was back and in person. Sean, I know you mentioned the event there. Was really exciting to have the trick-or-treaters back at the township. We had Radner Art Center, or Wayne Art Center, as well as Radner Memorial Library participate with us and do some activities with the kids. So it was a really big hit, and nice to see everybody get out and about, and of course come back and visit the township building. We also had the Radner Run. This was the 44th annual this year. In addition to the 5-mile run, which we had this year, we had over 300 that were registered for the run. We also had a new 2-mile run, which had almost 200 registered for it. It also hubbed at the township building, started at the regular start and finish, but it utilized the trail and was a very, very exciting new component to the event, and something that we're going to continue for years to come, certainly. And then, of course, in addition to those two parts of the event, there's also a half-mile kids fun run that goes along the 5-mile course. It goes a half-mile out, I'm sorry, a quarter-mile out and then back. So we had great success with that too. We had 40 registered. So it was a fun day. It was actually a really beautiful day. And again, had it back in person. There was a virtual component, so we did have a number of people register for that as well, but it certainly didn't stop the volumes of people that showed up on event day, not only to help out and volunteer, but just a lot of people came out to cheer others on who were running in the race. So we'll have lots of great pictures and video footage from that. I know Mainline Network is working on those for us. As Commissioner Farhay had also mentioned, you know, we're knee deep in Santa's delivery gift drop-offs right now. We have had with this event nothing short of an average of 10 to 15% increase every year in terms of growth. Our first year was about 40, first year to second year was about 40%. And then we kind of went steady around 15% growth on top of each year. So in order to manage that volume, we opened up the gift drop off to almost the whole month of November. So folks will have an opportunity to drop off their gifts. They started on November 1st and they can go right up until November 27th, which is our dedicated day. So a lot of that was done just to alleviate the volume that we have on the drop off day, because last year we had so many cars converge on the township building. So we had to work on a different system to try and alleviate that a bit. And then we'll also have a good idea going into Saturday, the 27th, you know, the volume that we can expect, so we can better plan for that. So that has been a colossal event that we've been working on and gearing up for the delivery date, which is on December 5th. We also have the New York City trip back. I think we have 2 seats left. As a matter of fact, one of our former Parks and Recreation Board members, Pat Gillen, is going to be going on the trip. So I'm going to look forward to him. That's what I thought when I saw him on the registration list. So I was excited that he'll be participating. So I'll get a chance to see him, because I'm going to be running the trip on that day, along with Natalie from our department. As we head into the new year, I know we're going to have some big changes coming with our staff. Tracy's going to be out having a baby in January, and then Heather is going to be out in May having a baby. So Natalie's going to be stepping up and filling a lot of roles for us. So we're kind of discussing, you know, obviously our strategic planning as we head into the new year, and just trying to plan appropriately for the volume of staff that we have. You know, we're not a big department to begin with, so we definitely will have some tempering to the upcoming events and things that we have going on. We will soon in the new year jump right into the Daddy-Daughter Dance, which we have actually retitled that event the Sweetheart Dance, the Sweetheart Valentine's Dance. So if you hear me talking about that, that's what I'm referring to. So registration for that is actually going to open on Monday, December 13th. Actually, I take that back. Wednesday, December 15th. The registration will open for that. And as you guys probably have heard me talk about in the past, that is an event that sells out like within an hour or two. So we're excited, and it'll be back in person. Last year we had a virtual, we actually had 2 virtual versions of it. This year it'll be back in person at the Inn at Villanova University. So we're excited to get those going. I had also announced last month that Rick Foster was promoted to the Public Works Director. So everybody knows that. I know we've got, you know, full board here tonight, so I wanted to make that announcement in case anyone missed it. And then Steve Ledgerton was also promoted to the Park Supervisor. So he's been doing a really great job and getting lots of great things done, as those guys have been, and of course, you know, are dragged in all kinds of different directions, especially being that we're in leaf season right now. And those guys, every one of them are pulled out. So the only time we kind of get them back is when we have like very specific projects that are eminent that we need them to work on in the parks. So I know that they've been really busy. As we head into December, we also are going to be going through a website launch. So the township website will look and feel a lot different from what you see now. That day of transition will be December 6th. Our department is working tirelessly to get our pages in order and all of our sources of information and everything that we have available. Initially, we were going to be developed into a microsite, which was going to be our own sort of like look and feel and design. But that we've had to do a reboot on that project. So right now we're working to kind of fold ourselves into the existing, new township website. And then there is a possibility out on the horizon in the new year, we may walk back down that road of a different type of website. Just given the magnitude of what we do and what we have available. I mean, our pages far exceed the township's pages in general, by probably about 3 to 1. So there's just a lot of information, obviously that people are looking for relative to parks, all the programs, all of the events, which serves as a very large volume. When we do launch the new website, the department will go back to the Parks and Recreation department. We had traditionally been the Parks and Recreation department for many, many years, since the 1970s when the department first came to fruition, up until about 2010. And then we digressed to recreation and community programming, which is not always stated in that way. I think folks, kind of put us on a couple different buckets, and it's a really long title. So, and I think everyone thinks of this as Parks and Recreation anyway. So we're going to be going back under that header. So you'll see that change as well.
Wow.
So a lot of exciting stuff coming up. A lot of things, requiring a lot of time and attention. I know there's some projects that are listed under the old business. I can talk about those when we get to them, if we want to, kind of move on to some of the more pressing topics tonight.
Well, thanks a lot, Tammy. I would expect and hope that a couple of our board members will continue to be little elves on December 5th, delivering gifts to the township residents. It's always fun to see them working around the township.
And if anyone
I'm
wants
going to,
Santa,
I'm sorry.
Santa too. Go Quinn.
Yep. Director Babson had to hop off for a little bit, so I'll skip over the school board report for now. I'll go to Claire and Shade Tree.
Hi, everybody. Shade Tree is in a terrific holding pattern. We got through our meeting last night in record time, and then we spent a really good amount of time reviewing the ordinance. We're very lucky in this township to have Eileen Brett running that, and Frank Paris, all the people on the Shade Tree Committee, James Gibbons, Seth. It's really remarkable to see the progress we've made as a commission to, better the understanding as a whole township as to how the preservation of our tree canopy is so important. So I feel very fortunate. I don't do a whole lot on that committee, but I want to say that, Ricky, everyone is incredibly gifted and committed. So we make good progress there.
Great, thanks for serving there, Claire, wearing multiple hats as always. All righty, I'm going to turn to old business, and I thought before we opened the floor up, which has been our developing custom on this topic, it might be instructive. I'm not sure if Tammy or Mary would just give a high-level overview, specifically of the November 9th meeting, just so that those who were not privy to it or available there at least can start with the same piece of information or body of knowledge before we enter today's discussion. I know there's been a lot of emails have been sent out, a lot of comments, and we're certainly very appreciative on this board that folks are taking such an interest in this and providing some very thoughtful input. But Tammy or Mary, I'm not sure which one of you wants to speak to this.
Tammy, did you want to jump in? You've probably been more involved with the notes lately than I have.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not typing the notes. I'm having Natalie do it, but I'm definitely going to go through them because I know some of the things, I have to transcribe a little bit for her, obviously.
I'll bet you did if you're looking at my handwriting.
No, I got you. I read them though. I definitely understood them, but there were some like, where you would abbreviate certain things. I knew what they meant. So I'll be able to, kind of put
Okay.
that detail to
Okay.
them. But no, I thought we had a very productive and heavily attended roundtable meeting on November 9th. It took place in the Radnor room. There was approximately 30 in attendance. So we had a really good group. I think everyone was focused on development of priorities and, making great suggestions and, giving a lot of good feedback. I feel like everything that was given and provided was consistent with all of the feedback that we've had so far overall. I mean, we didn't hear any sidewinders. No one was looking for an ice rink at the park or a, spray ground or anything like that. So I think overall, the trees, continue to, be at the top of the list. We put up a dry erase board and we started to etch out, what these things are. Obviously, the trees stood at the top. Preservation to all of the healthy trees was critical. And then also that we made some notes based on the feedback about increasing the plantings of the trees, the natives, removal of invasives was another thing that came up, in the ecology, the preservation, restoration, obviously, and then incorporating and injecting educational components to those as the park unfolded. We talked a bit about the pond. I know the pond is a little bit of an enigma to the project because we know that some of the pieces are, first of all, there's not clear definition to what we want to do with the pond or what we need to do to the pond. We do know based on a study that was done that the pond doesn't serve as a major storm water basin. So the amount of flow that goes to the pond is not significant enough that it's making or would make a significant difference to how stormwater flows. And that's consistent on what we've actually heard from a couple different sources throughout the years. I know Steve more recently had another study done on that where he worked we worked to get a different understanding. Obviously storms have changed a bit. So where the impact seems to be is where the culvert is that comes in and feeds into the Weir, and then where the Weir, kind of cuts into the Gulf Creek, as well as water coming in and off the Weir and into the pond is where the concern is. And I think overall there's unison that there's concern and we need to focus on that part of the project. However, what the need is and how or whether or not it runs concurrent to the current project is, I think, still in question. And Mary, obviously you can always jump in and tell me if you think I'm wrong, but I think there's still an air of uncertainty around the pond and what we can do, other than we know, we want to install the aerators. We think that's very important. We know that there are some pieces around the pond as far as the walking path and whatnot that do need to be considered, and how and when that's appropriate. So when the other items are fixed, I think is what we kind of have to determine. So preservation of the history was another one that is definitely paramount. In particular, we heard a lot about the stable building rehabilitation, but not only have we heard a lot about rehabilitating the building, we've also heard some adverse feedback. So even though we didn't have anyone at the meeting speaking out, energetically about that, we know we've gotten some emails, we've gotten some feedback to indicate that there's some folks that are adverse to allocating taxpayer money towards the rehab of the stable. So that's something I think, we're going to have to talk about and balance and figure out. And maybe that's something that's, more cost driven based on, what we think the feasibility is of restoring the building will be. So maybe that's how that decision, kind of ultimately gets made. But we know that, having a more detailed engineering assessment is something that's needed. It's going to be needed in order for us to get there. As a matter of fact, on the agenda tonight, I had put that I was seeking a motion to support potentially going and getting that feedback and getting that assessment so that we can start to, kind of understand what that might look like, in terms of how the building would operate. We heard a lot of things. We heard, having indoor space, having camp offices, camp operational space, storage, bathrooms. Of course, I have an opinion to that, would just be to keep it as, simple as possible. I don't know that an indoor facility per se is consistent with everything we've talked about with regards to Fenimore Woods. So, obviously there's some discussion that might have to be done there. So again, tying back the preservation of history, some discussion about the bridges and how those might be restored, to what degree, I think is something we're going to have to probably understand a little bit more and make some decisions on. Obviously, if there's restoration that provokes DEP and higher authorities, that could present some difficulties for us, as well as extend the timeline of the project. So maybe some of the restoration is a little bit more simplistic in that regard. Again, I'm saying this without knowing structurally what is wrong with those facilities, with those structures exactly. So that's something I think that would have to be evaluated a bit further. That's my house phone, sorry. So a little bit more of a minimalist approach, I think, is what we heard too. As little as we can do to, change the infrastructure to the park, the better. And, more preservation of the nature, the natural, resources that are there. How can we, help those to flourish more? I think that was kind of like an overriding thought pattern. The pavilion, I think, is still something that, folks are discussing, and I'm not sure to what degree, there can be changes there. I didn't get a full sense of, we want to have, we want to maintain the outdoor permitted activities we currently have versus we want to wean those back and maybe put more of a cap or a capacity limit to those. So I think I didn't get a sense that we really landed anywhere there. So I think that requires a little bit more discussion, and then ultimately, may dictate, what the covered space looks like, where it's located, etc. But I know when we left the meeting, we were going to have some structural assessment done to the pavilion as well, so we can understand what's wrong with it. Let's, like, from a detailed perspective, like, we know by looking at it, the fascia boards are coming apart. Some of the timber posts are weakened. There's definitely some changes in grade to the concrete pad. What can we do to those things to fix it from, again, a minimalist, perspective, versus a full scale replacement. So I know that's something that we talked about, and I think Steve Norsini is going to work on getting some more information there. We heard about the playground as a possibility for renovation. We heard, that it's popular. We heard that it's very popular. Actually, we had a few folks attend and were large advocates to keep the playground. And then on the flip side, we had some folks that were advocates of a more natural play space.
Mhm.
So versus a metal and, plastic type playground, that we see in some of our other parks, but more of an outdoor nature classroom based playground. So that's definitely a consideration. There was also a little bit of discussion about the parking lots, which I think until we understand the usages, it's going to be hard to say the parking lot should be A, B, C, or D, because I think the usage and the amenities are going to guide the parking and the capacity for parking. And then just, I think one last thing too, there was discussion about potentially with the pavilion, depending on how, decisions were made relative to it staying in the same place and the impacting accessibility versus the potential of moving it up to the flat ground space that's near and adjacent to the stable. So there was some discussion there about that as well. But I think, Sean, I think you brought this up during the meeting. I think we still go back to the same question, like, what do we want Fenimore Woods to be? Like, what do we want folks to do there? Do we want to, like, how do we want it to be used? And, I think that's where it's going to really tie back to the definition of what happened. So at the end of the day, like I said, I don't think there was anything outlandish that came out at the meeting. There was nothing unexpected. But I think we had really positive conversation, and overall, I think everybody was really motivated to move forward.
Mhm.
Tammy, communication is paramount, and that's what you're doing. So I think that we're going to be in whatever's decided, we're going to be in much better shape.
Tammy, have you been able to come up with a date in January that might work for a second roundtable?
Yes, I would like to propose Tuesday, January 25th. That seems to be, it gives folks enough time to get back from the holidays. And then we have the challenge, of course, of the room availability.
Yeah.
And then that's after the Martin Luther King holiday. So that seemed to work. Yeah, because that's kind of like, right there in the middle of the month. And I know that the schools are off on Monday, people go away or they do service, during that weekend. So it's a little far away, thinking of it right now, but I know the time will go fast with the holidays. But
Yeah.
I definitely feel like, another roundtable is definitely needed. I mean, not only just to hear if there's any, new feedback, but to also start to really dig into this feedback a little bit more and, hopefully start to have a little bit more of an assessment of the pavilion and potentially maybe even assessment of the stable if we can.
Yeah.
Can I add to that conversation a little bit about, I was really glad to have been at that meeting. And Sean, thank you. And Tammy, I think you exactly right, reading Mary's notes, of all the things that we touched upon. I would like to add, if it's possible, something that I came away with, which is, a couple times people said we can't be everything to all people or all, whatever that expression was. And I actually feel like we can get pretty close to something that's going to be good for a lot of people. And after that meeting, and I was wondering if we could refocus for the next roundtable. I was really pleased to see that we've engaged so many good minds and that want to be there, but can we refocus and have a little bit of a charge, like, hey, Friends of Fenimore Woods, can you itemize some things that are, your top priorities? And engineer, can we get them to say, here's a couple of things that we think are a way to start? Commissioners, our board, I would like to see us kind of focus on what we are looking toward. And I think the possibility of understanding what's the infrastructure, what is actually happening with the infrastructure is a great place to start for our township. And then we can go from there, because I was a little bit afraid that we were going to get off on tangents, that we might not be as focused as we could be. To preserving, I agree, preservation and accessibility. We can do accessibility that's going to be in conjunction with preservation and maintenance, right? Those three things seem to be like the three things that we can integrate. I don't know, Mary, can you?
No, I agree.
that?
I mean, I think you're right, Claire. I think it's true. You can never get everything you want. I keep hearing the Rolling Stones in the back of my head, but I think you're right. It's possible to get a whole lot of what people want here. We do need to know I mean, people hate to have to prioritize because it means they're going to maybe give up something. But I think we need that because certain things may work and certain things may hit it like an ADA roadblock, and then you have to detour and do something different. So I'm even picturing a matrix, like if then, what you can have and what you can't have, what's compatible, what's not compatible. It could get a little complex. That's our job. We need the input from the community now, and then we can give them some, periodic feedback on what's realistic and what's not. But that prioritization, and then what can work, and what can't work. If we have X, we can't have Y. Yeah, we need to get that all figured out. But I think you're right. I think we can get a lot of what people seem to want.
And I would like to add here again, I said it at that meeting, at the roundtable meeting, but I believe accessibility is not something that gets tripped. I think accessibility goes very much hand in hand in priority with preservation, because what we're trying to do is preserve a natural park so that everybody can enjoy. So I think we can do that in a way that is the best we can.
Yeah, I maybe I'm overstating here, but the ADA implications are not something I think we should go dramatically out of our way to avoid, because the whole point of the ADA is to make parks and all sorts of facilities accessible. So we have to be mindful of it. It has a cost implication. It may make things unreachable, or unachievable, but that shouldn't be our goal, is to avoid the ADA at all costs. That's totally contrary to the idea of opening up these facilities to everybody. So I agree with you.
The other
Thank
thing,
you.
yeah, no, the other thing real quick we need to take a look at is what happens with that pond. Because if DEP gets involved, then when you
Ugh.
talk about prices being not only astronomical, but it'll be out of reach.
I think that the points that Mary and Claire make about needing to focus is an important one, because at the end of the day, there is a finite amount of funds allocated to this project. And while it's wonderful to talk about these great ideas in the abstract, the reality is we're not going to be able to fund everything on the wish list. So that's why the priorities are important. I did note, Tammy, I did note your motion. My thinking for how we're going to proceed at this point is we'll come back to the motion part. I'll make the motion, someone can second it, then we can have a discussion about it as to what we're going to do, whether we're going to adopt that motion or not. I know we have folks on the line, and it's been sort of my custom in running these meetings. I'd like to give them an opportunity to have the floor, and then our board then can have some discussion about it, and then we can move to that motion. Unless anyone on this board has an issue with that or wants to say something before we proceed to public comment as to Fenimore Woods, that's how I want to proceed. All right. Hearing no problems. Now, Tammy and Ian, I'm not sure how we quite get folks linked in to comment if they wish. I know we have 5 attendees showing up on the screen, and certainly I would invite anyone who wants to speak at this time to do so.
I think there's a way to have them do a raise of hand feature. So we have Laura Gill right now who has raised her hand, so I'm going to click on her and allow her to talk.
Great.
Laura, you can, there you go.
Yep, can you hear me?
We can. Thank you, Ms. Gill.
Good. Yep. Hi, everybody. So thank you for sending out the link and letting us participate in the conversation. So Tammy, just wanted to call out that you did a great job consolidating a very, how do I want to say this? It was a lengthy, a detailed, spirited discussion on the 9th, and you did a really great job of consolidating all the points. So I just really wanted to say that I think that a lot of people in the meeting that I was at on that roundtable, they were really focused, I think, on making sure their voices were heard. And I think that was really the point, right, of that first roundtable, is making sure the community felt heard. But at one point in the meeting, everyone did raise their hand in agreement that they were for preservation, right? So all I'm really suggesting is for the next roundtable meeting, and I think Claire, you made this point earlier, that we do have a bit of more focused approach. So, you know, everybody does seem like they do want to have that preservation, and how can we kind of, instead of going off on the 20-minute tangents that we continued to kind of go into in that meeting, you know, can we get some sort of agreement up front of what those main points are and then go from there? And my wheels were spinning in the meeting. I am a project manager myself. I do have some exercises that I can send over. They're kind of hands-on activities where everybody can kind of get up, and there's like voting and different things that we can do to kind of reach consensus quicker. I do think that would be a nice thing that maybe we can try in the next roundtable meeting. But to your point, and really just to sum up my my comment here, it does sound like the two main conversations that you just brought up at the end is, what do we want Fenimore to be used for? Or what do we want Fenimore Woods to be, and what do we want it to be used for? It felt like in the meeting, many of the participants really wanted to make sure that we could continue to use Fenimore as is, a natural park where you can go and see the pond and walk around and enjoy the trees and the nature, et cetera. Have the opportunities to kind of use the pavilion and the playground for maybe more, you know, coordinated activities, but really just trying to preserve as much of the nature as we can. So that's kind of what I took coming out of that meeting. And again, Tammy, if you're open to it, I'm happy to send over kind of some of those exercises like I use in some of my similar meetings that I have at my job for roundtables. that seemed to really kind of get everybody on the same page and get that consensus.
That would be great, Ms. Gill. Thank you.
Sure. And that was it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ms. Gill, for your input. Appreciate you being online tonight. I don't know if there's anyone else from our attendees that wish to speak.
I know
They certainly can.
I know Doug McCone wanted to speak. I don't see him there. I
But
know,
Doug sent me a message, so
Okay.
I'm happy to read it. I don't see any other hands up on the attendee list.
Okay.
They may go up, so we'll keep a watch on that, but I'm happy to read Doug's message. So Doug said that during the meeting last week, there were a lot of major items identified. I copied what I think was most of them. They are bathrooms for the park, playground for the children, having a pavilion, the pond hyphen improvement, accessibility to those with disabilities, stormwater management, tree preservation, removal of invasive species, storage, bridge repairs, nature-based play area, parking, porous pavement, question mark, preservation of historic status. All of these are important. My own vision for what this park should be is that it currently has the right balance between the uses currently there, other than the lack of toilet facilities, and a good renovation is in order. A wholesale reprogramming of the site and the spaces within it is unnecessary and may be counterproductive. Of the current uses, I would prioritize preservation of the tree canopy over most of the rest. The second would be having the pavilion in a central location where users can view the entire park, including watching their children in both the play areas and the trees between it and the pond. We need restrooms for public use, and they absolutely must be fully handicapped accessible. Along the edge of the park where the existing old barn is a good location that is available to all, but is not intrusive to the rest of the site. It should not be incorporated into the pavilion since parties or other events would be intruded upon by others who are not part of the event. The playground is very nice and not in a bad location, although there might be another site that is better. One more thing, however, is that it needs to be brought into compliance with ADA standards for play areas. There must be an accessible route from one of the parking areas to all major activities of the park, but I am sure that can be done without cutting down a lot of trees. Paths do not need to be straight. You can find ADA requirements at www.access-board.gov if you wish more to come. Thank you, Doug, for providing that. We'll make sure the board gets a copy of that as well if you're, I guess if you're tuning in or if you watch later.
Thanks, Tammy.
Thanks, Tammy. Commissioner Party, do you have something to say? Okay.
We do have some more hands up.
Yeah, going in order, Gretchen was first, then we'll go to Mr. Kearney, although Ms. Gill did put her hand back up again. We'll give everyone a chance to go have one bite at the apple before they get a second. So I think Gretchen, if we can get her on, that'd be great, please.
Just let me know if you can hear me, guys.
We
We
can.
can, Gretchen, thank you.
Okay, great. So I was at the meeting on the 9th, which I did a lot of listening, and I was, it was very encouraging to hear everyone's, enthusiasm and level of interest for the preservation of the tree canopy. I know that a couple of things did come up. And Tammy, either you or Steve Norsini mentioned that a little investigation was going to be done. I think someone mentioned that there would be some sort of possibility of someone looking into the state of the stables I know that there was some talk about the state of disrepair of the stormwater inlet, where there's a lot of damage, and I know that's and the around the Weir. I don't know if I'm describing it properly. I know that Steve was going to do a little research on that. There was just a couple of things that people were going to look into. And I just think it's important it would be nice if there could be some sort of progress made on that before the next meeting. And I'm not sure how long those things take, but I know that there were more than a couple of things that people were going to follow up on. And I think it would be nice to incorporate that at the next meeting.
I can comment to that. So during the meeting, we talked about doing a structural assessment, a more formal structural assessment on the condition of the pavilion, so that we
Okay,
can
right.
understand exactly what needs to be done. Like, is it a roof replacement, or is it just replacement of shingles? Can the structure itself be maintained, or utilized and then just re-shingled? As far as the fascia, how many fascia areas are deteriorated? How are they deteriorated? How can they be repaired? It's like something more intrusive, to say, like, from a minimal standpoint, here's what we could do. And then ultimately being able to understand that, and then riding off of that, determining, okay, how does that impact accessibility? What accessible features now do we need to consider? Which, arguably we may need to consider accessibility regardless if it stays right in the same location. So, that would probably be a prudent consideration regardless if there's a space that stays there. So that was something Steve Norsini was going to work on. I believe he's been in touch with somebody and is working through that process. Now, one of the things I was asking the board tonight by way of a motion, which, just to kind of make a statement about that, the motion I had sort of succinctly put together for the board on the agenda, you guys can reword that however you want. Like, that's just a starting point. But my goal with that was to allow me to go to our engineering firm, which is Gannett Fleming. They are the township engineers, have them finalize a proposal that would take a really detailed look at the building, but not only a detailed look at it, tell us what's wrong with it, what needs to be done to make it functional, or not functional, but to restore it, let's say, but also take a look at the environmental hazards that exist within it. What are they? And then also relative to how we want to use it. So, from my opinion, at a minimum, we want to restore the bathrooms, and we want to restore the small storage areas that flank the bathrooms, and make that I prefer not to have it be a gathering space personally, because I don't have a personal use for it in terms of what we do. Maybe others do, and if that's something that someone wants to, bring to the table, that's fine. But I think again, a minimalist approach to it, just bearing the costs in mind. I think having some sort of a just bathroom space and then storage space if we need to store something in there for the facility. So then I would go and get a proposal from Gannett Fleming that ultimately would have to go to the Board of Commissioners for approval. So if the Parks and Recreation Board said, that's important, let's go and let's get that done, so that we can understand a little bit more about not only what's wrong and what we can do to fix it, but also what it would cost to restore it the way we want to use it, then we can get that ball rolling. Now, I think it's unrealistic to believe that we would have that report, even if, the stars and the moon and the sun all aligned, in the next few weeks to make that happen, or next month to make that happen. I don't think we'd have that report completely done by January 25th, but, that would be something we would want to understand, I believe, fairly early in 2022. Because I think I kind of stated this before, I think that's a big decision relative to the improvements to the park. It's a big portion of it, or could be a big portion, of what's there. And then also might, by way of a domino effect, sort of dictate other, other changes potentially. So, and then you had also mentioned about the damage on the weir and the inlet. I know Steve did work with an engineering firm to come in and do a study on that. We do know that there's some structural discord going on, and that whole concrete structure is got some, undermining, we'll say, going on. And then we know that it potentially is being more overloaded now with the larger storms. I'm not sure that we had a direct action item relative to that. And I think that's where we need to understand a little bit more how much of that is a priority, and then how much of that could really be part of this project, because it would include higher permitting agencies like DEP to get involved, and I think further study too. That could definitely hold the project up longer. But if that was deemed a priority, then I think that's something, again, we would need to determine and then move towards that.
I think Steve said that that would be a specific stormwater project.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep, I do remember he did say that.
I'm just going to ask another quick question, and then I'm going to let someone else have a turn. So, is it normal that that you would ask the in-house, I guess I may be saying this wrong, Gannett Fleming, to do this structural assessment, even if they're the ones they are the designers for this project? Is that, or is it the same? It's a different company?
Yeah, no, Gilmore and Associates
Oh,
is,
Gilmore, I'm sorry.
yeah, and we wouldn't ask them
Okay,
for that. We would use we have a retainer with Gannett Fleming.
okay,
So they still scope out and price out ancillary projects that
Okay.
aren't within their retainer, which this would not be.
okay. I think I got my G's mixed up.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Ms. Grobel. I think Mr. Kearney was up next.
A quick question, Bill, before we jump over
Yes,
there.
please.
Tammy, we have what, is it $2 million of bond money for this project?
Well, given that we've already spent a lot on design, and
That was my question.
we're just, don't hold me to it, but we're around 1.7.
So we're down to 1.7, and then we don't know what the cost to do an evaluation, structural evaluation of the stables is going to be. I want to be cognizant of inflation and cost of everything going up with regard to this project. The longer we wait, one, and two, money that we're spending on our professionals for their fees to do some of these things. And we're talking about the pond, et cetera. I think that's going to be a big number to bring that back in. So I want to make sure everybody's cognizant that, there's a limited amount of money there, and we've spent a piece of it already. And just wanted to bring that up.
Can I jump in here real
Yeah.
quick? No,
Yeah, quickly, because we're gonna have an opportunity to discuss all this in conjunction with the motion. But
Oh, okay, then I'll hold off. I'll hold off.
Okay.
Let everyone speak.
All right, and thanks, Chris, as well. Let's turn the floor over to Mr. Kearney for public comment, and if we're done public comment, we're going to get to this. We can kick around the pluses and minuses of the motion.
Okay, I got the unmute message. Can you now hear me?
We can. Thank you, Mr. Kearney.
Okay, I'd just like to briefly comment. I was at the November 9th meeting, and say towards the end of the meeting, I think sort of like the board to know this because you weren't all there, is that a lot of the discussion basically I would characterize as people recognizing that there's a serious tension between the preservation goals of the project, disability access, or however you want to put it. And I think, especially, from the community standpoint, this is not an area where any one of us, except possibly Doug McCone, have any personal experience. And, in asking folks to say, well, what is the most important would say the trees, but if again, providing access to the other facilities in the park, be it the stable or the pavilion or the playground or the pond or any of those other things would require for access to meet the ADA requirements, require significant removal of the trees, then there's a tension there between the preservation and the access. And I want the board to be aware of that, because that's a serious problem. And I don't think anyone is real comfortable with any kind of discussion that involves both of those two things together, although they're both present. And so I don't know exactly how you would want to treat that, but for any meeting that would come up in January, I think that the community has to know what we should be doing, what we're required to do, what the tensions are, and what the trade-offs might be. And I don't think we can do that. We're not at a point now where at least I would be in a position to say, okay, this is more important than that, or we don't do this because it would require more access, et cetera, in order to meet the requirements of the regulations. Plus, there's folding in additional considerations that might be made because it's historic property and the rules can be loosened somewhat. So I don't understand any one of those things in detail, but I want the board to be aware of that, because I think it's really important, and it's going to be a big hurdle that the community is going to have to get over.
Thank you, Mr. Kearney, for your comments, and I think you highlight a key point, which I think Claire and Mary we're getting to in a roundabout way, and it's fine and dandy to talk in conceptual terms about concept A, concept B, concept C. I think we need to get this thing out of the station a little bit with some more concrete ideas to appreciate those no pun intended, downstream effects, whether it be ADA or whatnot, that might come with individual choices of certain items on the project. But certainly there's a tension there, and I think folks' priorities can change depending on what the answer is. If aspect A is done and it has downstream effects that are unsatisfactory, then maybe choice A isn't the choice, it's choice B or something else. But I think you raised a good point. I thank you for your comment. All right, Ms. Gill did have her hand raised. I don't know if she still cares to speak.
Yes.
Not sure. Ms. Gill?
Can you hear me? I didn't get the unmute.
I think
thought I was
your mic's still live, so you
Oh,
go right ahead.
I hope I didn't say anything embarrassing.
You did not. You did not.
I put a comment in the chat, and I meant to bring this up before. Tammy, I know you had alluded to some people maybe submitted some adverse opinions about what to do at the park, different from what pretty much everybody at the round table had kind of agreed upon. And I think that there was an action to include maybe some of those comments within the summary as well. I know that you guys are still kind of going through and summarizing the notes from the meeting, but I think that that was an ask as well to kind of understand what the other voices in the community are saying that were not able to attend the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a matter of procedure, I have to get clarification on how those can or cannot be included. Because we have a meeting that wasn't necessarily a formal meeting, with no quorum. We try to put the notes together even for those meetings. And that's just been traditionally what we've done for Parks and Recreation. It's not a requirement, legally we've gotten feedback on that from John Rice, our township council. So I think I need to find out to what degree that information needs to be included as well as minutes, since or I guess it wouldn't be minutes, but as notes to the meeting, because those folks were not physically present. So I'm not sure if there's some level of consensus that they have to give in order to release that information. That's something I need to look a little further into. Now, that is information that the board member has shared with them. So as those emails come in, they're either addressed already to them, or they're items that I get relative to the project and I do share with them. So I just need to get from folks above me input on how that information would be divulged.
Okay.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily has to be actual emails with people's names and their corresponding opinions, but maybe just a summary of just themes in the meeting, in those emails. Yes, we received 10 emails and everyone was for it, or whatever that might look like. And if not, then I would be curious for future sessions what it looks like for other people who are not able to attend, and if it's even worth it to have them email in their opinions as well. So my dog's gonna start barking.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Gill. I don't see anyone else in the attendees portion with their hands up, so I'll do a last call on public comment on Fenimore Woods. Doesn't mean we might not come back to it, but before the board considers a motion. All right. Okay. All right. So what I would propose to do to help guide this discussion among this board is, as I suggested at the outset, there's a suggested motion in our agenda. I will read that suggested motion. I will move for it at least to be considered. Someone can second it, and then we can discuss the merits and whatnot. And Commissioner Farrell will have the first crack once we do that. So the proposed motion would be a recommendation from this board to ask for the Board of Commissioners to authorize architectural and engineering services that will review and conduct the feasibility of converting the Fenimore Woods stable building to a usable public space for restrooms and storage. I'm not sure procedurally if I'm entitled to make a motion on it, but I'll make a motion on it. Someone can second, and then we can discuss it and vote on it after we're done discussing it. Do we have a second?
I have a second.
All right. With that, Commissioner Farhi, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Since your comments, I think we're going to really go towards the gist of this discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be. Can you hear me? Because I'm on earbuds now.
Yes.
Okay.
We can.
Cool. I'll be real brief. I just wanted to piggyback on what Chris said. Yeah, we are very cognizant of increased cost. I'm working on a project with another commissioner as well as with Laura Marion, and the bids are coming in much higher now. So we are aware of that. We're also in the middle of budget time too. So we're cognizant of the prices of raw material and labor, and being able to find someone. We may get a bid done, but if we can't find the workers, then that may put us in limbo. So there's just a lot of variables out there, but I don't even know what it would cost to evaluate these stables. Not to say that we could put our public works, our engineer, to kind of give a ballpark. I don't know if that makes sense, and I'll throw this to the board before we say, hey, let's go make a motion and whittle down some more of that money. Could our public works take a look at it, but maybe more of our engineering to say, look, I can tell you right now it's going to be X amount, so it's going to be cost prohibitive or not. I don't know, but I'm just throwing that out there, and whatever you decide is great. But just on a personal standpoint, and Bill Quinn, we've spoken about this. I went to West Valley. I know that you work for Laura Marion. There was this huge, enormous tower structure. It was called Tower Lane, and there were some kids that were doing some things that they shouldn't have been doing in there, and drinking and probably smoking. So instead of locking it and closing it, they just tore it down. And this was a structure years ago, before I was born, but a couple hundred years old or so. My fear is that once you start taking these structures down, you can never get them back. So I wish I could give you an answer one way or the other, but I just want to throw stuff out there for the board. This is your vote, and then the Board of Commissioners will take what you have to say. So thank you.
If I may,
Commissioner,
just
please.
to interject some more information. So first of all, this isn't a study that our in-house engineering department can do. This is something that does require an outside consultant to take on and manage. And an order of magnitude of cost of the scope of services is going to be around $15,000. So we do know that it is a proposal that is going to have to go to the board because it exceeds the threshold and which could be, authorized internally. But that'll give you at least some sense. Now, we do have some additional things we're looking for in terms of understanding the environmental pieces. I'm unaware right now if those will be an addendum to that scope. That's something that we would subsequently find out and work through upon having, again, a support or recommendation. Again, I think what it comes down to is, based on what the Parks and Recreation Board has heard so far, is this a step we want to take? Because it is going to be an investment of money to just learn and get more information. And then it's also going to be an investment of time, and patience and getting information and understanding. And I know that right now it is a turbulent time in terms of materials, in terms of personnel. There's a lot of things the township is currently facing, relative to projects that are going on right now. We look at the tap trails still, it's in its punch list phase because we have materials that we just can't obtain to finish it. So, there's definitely a lot of considerations there. But just to give you at least an order of magnitude on what Gannett Fleming's scope would cost, it would be around that estimated cost.
Thanks, Tammy. I'm gonna let others comment too, but I'm gonna veer back to Chris Campbell since he raised the point earlier, give him a chance to add anything else here, or having heard the information on the magnitude of the cost, whether or not that changes his outlook or highlights his outlook. I don't know.
Thanks, Bill. I guess my personal opinion is that, I like history and I don't like seeing things torn down, but I'm not sure that the township is in the business of maintaining and rebuilding historic structures. And I think we all know that it's not going to be cheap, whatever might be done to that. And we're talking about a project for a park, not for a small building at one corner of it that may have a couple hundred years of history. I don't know the whole history of it, but my personal opinion is that if there's people out there that are interested in preserving it, then that's fine. We don't knock it down. We keep a barricade around it to keep people out of it. And, people can raise money in the community if they want to, do something with it. But I don't think the township is in a position now to spend money to evaluate it, to preserve it, redo it, and then after that's all done, to maintain it. I don't think they have the money, the budget, or the people to do that type of thing. It's just my personal opinion. But if we do something with that building, we're not going to have much money left for the things we want to do in the park, which is really what people want to use and enjoy.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone else like to comment?
I just think that underscores why it's important to have prioritization. I mean, if that's something that would blow the budget, then, we need to know what's the most important things here. I'm also wondering whether, I'm still in favor of putting it in front of the Board of Commissioners. But I'm wondering if this is something that there might be grant opportunities, historic preservation type things. I'd love to hear if, Radnor Historical Society had some views on that. But, but I still think we should proceed with the motion because I think it's worth at least getting to that stage.
Claire?
Is there a possibility of preserving part of the structure? As some of the pictures that were sent in the presentation that Tammy forwarded to us, where it seemed like, can we use some of the structure as backdrop for a new structure so it wouldn't cost as much? I'm just wondering, even if it's possible, not to preserve the whole thing as a historical structure, but to use the sort of ruins, if you will. I don't know the answer. I'm just putting it out there.
The only question that I would ask to that is that satisfactory to those who want to preserve it as its entirety?
It's a good question.
I think it'll.
If I may, the costs become excessive. What is the possibility of finding additional funds? because of the change in the nature of the original plan, the challenges that have presented themselves, would the township be in favor of looking at securing more funds or looking for another grant to do some kind of historical thing in coordination with the Historical Society?
Yeah, I mean, I can just comment on the grants. I mean, if grants were to be available for like, let's say we did a study and we found out that restoration was, X amount of, thousands of dollars, like if there was a grant that was available, we definitely could work through that process. As a matter of fact, we have 2 grants right now that are on, one that we've received on the project and one that is, we never pulled the application back. So I'm not sure what the status of it is. It was a, DCNR grant, and then we received a DCED grant. So we have a substantial amount of grants embedded into this, project as is, or, in accordance with the previous plan. Obviously, those are a moot point right now.
Thanks, Tammy. But before I comment, anyone else on the board want to comment regarding the motion or things related to that motion about asking for our BOC to authorize professionals to look at the feasibility aspects of the stables?
What is the, before we vote on the motion, what is the expected delays now? We're looking, what, 6 months down the road again now? Is that where we're looking in terms of getting these studies and fines and continued roundtable discussions, which of course I'm all in favor of, but the project is now pushed back further, and is the deadline artificial, or is it something that the township wants to complete by a certain time frame?
Well, I mean, it's possible that if we had a scope, an engineering scope, it's possible we could get that before the commissioners at their December 13th meeting. So they would review it on December 13th, vote it up or down. If they voted for it, we could get Gannett Fleming, in this case, going on the study in January. I imagine they still would be able to do that study even if there's a little bit of snow on the ground. I don't think that's going to preclude this study in any way. So, and then it would just be thereafter the time it would take them to put that together, which, that's at least a 1 to 2 month process. So, we're probably in, well into the first quarter before we get, a report or get more information. Obviously, we would kick it along and try and get it to move as quickly as possible. So then that would just tell us, again, that would just give us an order of magnitude. And I assume they would base any of their cost assessments given the current climate. I don't see how they couldn't, which, as we know, though, it's changing constantly. And who knows, maybe by February it's better. But I don't know the answer to that question.
My 2 cents on it are that the scope cost that Tammy cited does not strike me as exorbitant. And I think we've had a great exchange of ideas, but we need to start moving from the abstract to the real. And if the real knocks off 6 or 7 items from the potential wish list that's been collectively discussed, well, we need to get to that point and make those hard choices. There has been a significant amount of input on the stables, and I think we need to figure out what the story is there. I'm with Chris that I'm extremely doubtful that you can do much of anything without an extraordinary expense. I know Bill Quinn might be able to speak to this too, but back in the days where we as literally kept things in that building, and I haven't been in that building in 10 years, it was toxic then, to the point where I'd have respiratory distress for days on end after being in that building. I find it hard to believe a whole lot that's in the guts of that thing is salvageable, which would only tell me if we're preserving it, then that's going to be an extraordinary expense. But it's one thing for me to pontificate about that and speculate about that. It's another thing for professionals to say, you know what, Renfrey, you're wrong. We can do X, Y, and Z, and take some bleach in there and clean it out. And some structural elements are pretty easy to fix. That's, I think, a necessary discussion that needs to be had so that we can put that into the concrete world of, okay, we know we want to preserve trees. What else do we want to do, and how much money do we have? And if it's I just know the cost of what we did for the bathroom at Tennell. I know the cost at Enki, and that's pre-COVID, pre-supply chain issues. I have a hard time believing you're not going to use at least a majority of the money on that one structure, if that's what you're doing, before you get into preservation and remediation. But I'm not a professional in that. I think we need to know that information. I'm in favor of the motion for that reason. It might be $15,000 spent to roll out something or make it unfeasible. But I think we probably, one of the reasons we're revisiting this is at least in part a perception or belief among the public that folks weren't listening. And I think we do need to listen. And there have been some who said, if so-and-so wants work done there, let him go out and raise the funds. And those are some of the emails we did receive. But I think if you had to go by numbers, the numbers would point towards at least looking into trying to preserve that historic structure. And I think we owe it to folks to at least look into it. And if the answer is it's an extraordinary amount of money that's beyond the scope of the bond, well, that's an answer. And then we move on to try and find a solution once that answer's been given to us. So those are my, probably at this point, 8 cents, but those are my thoughts on the motion.
Bill, just real quick, can I ask, because I don't know the structure that well, if they knocked it down, could that field stone be reused for something? Or is that just making things much more complicated?
I don't know personally from an architectural standpoint, but those are would appear to me to be potential standalone type walls, at least the stone elements of it. But then again, I'm swimming in waters that really aren't where I should be swimming.
Okay.
Well, I think you make a fair point. I'd be willing to support the motion if we put the $15,000 limit in the motion. I really don't think we should be spending any more of this money for this park on something like that. 15 is a fairly small relative to what we're doing. If we're willing to change the the proposal to add that number, then I would support it.
And if the price becomes exorbitant, do we put a plan to go ahead, not to exceed from the budget, and then have other groups solicit, fundraise, the Historical Society, again, share the burden if this is something, because it was not part of the original plan. And yes, of course, we're looking to accommodate everyone. At the same time, the practicality issue that, there are other priorities, and this is, yes, it's a priority, but it's not the priority.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, yeah, I think to answer your question, Bill, yes, sure, we can make that motion to the extent we make an advisory motion to the BOC. Hey, we in our reasoned judgment, this particular part of the scope should not exceed a dollar amount. I think that's a couple steps ahead of where we are with this motion, which is essentially the same concept of putting a dollar figure on this. And I'm receptive to Chris's thoughts on that. I don't know how precise 15 was. If it's 15.5 or something, I would hate to hamstring ourselves, although the BOC is the only one that has the authority to spend that money anyway. Our motion is only advisory, but I'm amenable to that kind of an amendment.
So if I may interject, refresh my memory, maybe it's already been covered and I just don't recall, but has there been any number floated out there about what the feasibility study might find in terms of, first of all, has there been a goal established for the feasibility study? Do we have a range of options for ideas of what to do with the stables that correspond to a particular dollar amount? It seems like there's a lot of unknowns, and I agree with Chris and Bill and others who have said that many projects like this around the country are funded by private donors or the community. So that I think that idea is worth keeping in play. So I guess my final point would be that until the feasibility study is done, I don't know how much that we can really say. Because I have no dollar amount in my head that I can even work with. I don't know if an engineer could go and check it out and say, you know what, given everything here, to do what you want to do, option A, option B, option C, we're talking 5, 10, 20 million. I'm just making that up. I have no idea. So, but I think in principle, I agree with the idea of sharing costs, and that it is quite possible to do that. It's done all the time. And also to have a set of ideas about ways to use the stables, so that it can correspond to a future estimate or estimates.
So if I may, I'm sorry,
Please, Kemi.
to Andrew's point. So we had, back in June, we had Meliora go and do a very cursory structural assessment. It was really visual. It was based on visual observations. It didn't include any type of, intrusive look in any way to the structure. It didn't look at anything relative to developing it a certain way, restoring it a certain way. All it looked at was, it was a conditions assessment, and how could the condition of the facility be preserved, basically. And what was determined was, and I can share this with the board. This is public information. It's not anything that's a secret or anything. But I know that there was, between the assessment that was given and then the factored contingencies, just to take a look at the facility, and again, not looking at it relative to codes, to electrical, to sewer, anything of that magnitude on what that would be. It was just basically just taking a look at the building, and how can we preserve it, and fix the roof, that way it's it's airtight, and it's free of continued water intrusion, etc., which obviously we've done with a tarp now, but meaning with its own roofing structure. And it was around the like $215,000 range to do that. But this was in June. Things obviously have changed, and things are very volatile right now. And again, like, I can't stress enough that this didn't take a deep look. This assessment was under $1,000. This was just something, that was a very cursory look. So there was documentation that was provided, so we know some of the areas that are cracking. We don't think there's any major type of undermine, but again, there was no way to take a look at the concrete slab that's underground to see what that looks like. A very high level visual assessment. So I'm happy to share that with the board, but I don't know that that number really gives you anything to hang your hat on, because it's not, this isn't relative to any type of use. It's not relative to code compliance. It's not relative to establishing interior accessibility and inclusive features, which we would have to do. I know that Mr. Kearney had noted that there's a way to do that and sort of, have some leeway, if you will, with regards to it being a historic structure. I don't know what that is. We would have to rely on an engineering firm to tell us that. What kind of, like I said, leeway a facility would have relative to those type of compliances. So I'm not sure if that helps or hinders, but I just wanted to toss that out there.
It does, thanks. Another criterion floating around in my head is there any way for an outside organization or person to quantify or somehow pithily sum up the historical value of these structures? So Mr. Kearney has done an amazing job, I think, of writing about and talking about these structures and putting some historical context on them. But in other words, it's just an idea that's rolling around in my head of, could some outside person say this structure is of such historical merit that, we would be willing to, I don't know, help preserve it or something like that. Just have that kind of conversation. Or, the opposite could apply, where someone could say, you know what, we see all kinds of structures like this, and, the historical merit and the expense, et cetera, maybe not work, that kind of conversation.
And that's why I'm wondering why, if someone in Radnor Historical Society or Delaware County Historical Society might have ideas or access to an expert or some way to respond to that point, Andrew, because that would be, me too, I'm trying to figure out, is this really a valuable asset? I mean, I hate tearing down historic structures. But is this really, an important structure? Is this a dime a dozen? Do we have a million of these around? It would be sad to take it down or not preserve it, but it wouldn't be a disaster from a historical preservation point of view. Maybe we need to reach out to Delco or Radnor Historical and see if they can sort of set us on a path to getting that information.
Yep.
Any more comment? I think I'm going to adopt Chris's amendment perhaps and then make a motion on that. I've lost my Roberts rules. I may be violating some procedure, but since this is an advisory board, I don't think this is going to go to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania to strike us down if we do it
Never know, Bill.
improperly. So any more comments? All right. So I guess the amendment will simply add at the end, and I'll read the whole thing, just at a price not to exceed $15,000. So the full motion would be that we would recommend to the Board of Commissioners that it authorize architectural and engineering services that will review and conduct the feasibility of converting the Fenimore Woods stable building to a usable public space for restrooms and storage at a price, or at a cost, I should say, not to exceed $15,000. Any amendments to that, or objections to the amendment, or discussion on the amendment?
Tammy, we have enough of a cushion on that 15,000?
So I know that I had gotten an original scope, and Steve and I went through it, and I know we have additional asks within it. We might need a little bit more freedom there. I would hate to have it be 16, 17, and then, are we splitting hairs? And I mean, obviously at that point, we can still take it to the board and it's for the board's consideration regardless.
Yeah.
Why don't we change it to 20,000, Bill?
Yeah, let's just make it 20 and the board can deal with it.
I just want you to know though, in our negotiation of it, we're not seeing that as an open check. That's not how Steve and I operate, just to let you know. We're pretty frugal when it comes to negotiating these things out.
Okay, I like that.
So we'll make an amendment to the amendment to make it at a cost not to exceed $20,000. Any comments or amendments to the amendment to the amendment? All right. Any more comments, Joe? I'm going to put it to a vote in a moment. Any more comments on this? All right. Well then, all in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. Looks like the motion passes unanimously. And then that can be passed on to our Board of Commissioners, and then they can certainly do with that as they see fit in terms of this authorization. And thanks, Tammy, for getting the horses out of the barn, so to speak, on this particular issue. I think it's important to move towards some points of concrete clarity on some of these items. All right. Well, with that, we are done our Fenimore Woods discussion, which is certainly the bulk of our meeting. We have a few items left, which I think I can probably just turn those over to Tammy. I'll turn one at a time. Tammy, the next item is the capital budget.
Yes, there was a special Board of Commissioners meeting back on September 30th. If you get a chance, be sure to check out that meeting. The discussion that's specific to the general capital, which is really the largest part of the capital budget and includes the parks, the trails, the facilities, is probably about 2/3 of the way through the meeting. And our township manager, Bill White, gave a really good explanation, through the different capital funds. Relative to this board, of course, is that capital fund where the parks and the facilities reside. And there was discussion within that about, there's no established funding, obviously, right this moment, other than the fact, we've obviously borrowed, we have money for Fenimore Woods. That's underway. We have money for the basketball courts at Callan, and Odoricio, those are dedicated funds that have been allocated. But as far as just a general, capital improvements funding mechanism is not in place currently. However, with that being said, there is the park impact fee, which exists for new development. So obviously it's a payment in lieu of whenever there's development that goes in within the township. And to date, there's about $374,000 that is balanced in that fund. And obviously $374,000 relative to the magnitude of projects that I'm sure you can conceptualize exist out there, makes it competitive in terms of what that could be utilized for. So I know that, Bill did a really good job of kind of, laying this all out. And I forget who it was in the meeting, kind of made the statement that, the requests for funding, and how projects are done, they come from all angles. We have residents that have, things that they would like to get done. Sometimes the commissioners have certain projects that they envision that are very important for their neighborhoods and their wards. And then of course there's the staff recommendations. And it's always trying to unravel public discussion to sort of figure out, where the pieces land. So I guess a couple of things. First of all, I wanted to acknowledge that money and how it potentially gets allocated next year could possibly come back to this board for decision making. And in fact, I think it should, regardless of what projects are being considered. So although the presentation did not discuss specific projects, we know that we've had some public feedback in those meetings that has been, there's been desires for sunshades at Enke Park, at Clemacrone Park. And I know that we've been getting a lot of feedback about that. And then Commissioner Abel also is a very strong advocate to have the comfort station replaced at Odoricio Park. So from a perspective of facilities and needs, there's definitely, in addition to those two items, there's other things that exist out there. So just from my perspective, we can get into more detail if and when the decision making needs to present itself. But what I can do is I can share with you what I sent to the finance department when we started to go through this process, just so you can see those projects. I just want to kind of preface it by saying that, there's a lot of stuff on the list. And it's a living, breathing document. It changes every day. There's new projects that present themselves. There's new discussions that happen and pieces unfold. And then, as as we start to come through public discussions, so even as something as simple as, replacing the comfort station over at Odoricio, that could go in, 5 different directions. So there's a lot of discussion on these projects, I think, that have to take place. The most notable that I would just suggest, because I'm not sure how clearly it comes out in the meeting, is Radner Activity Center and the condition of the roof is definitely a very, very big project, and a much needed project. If in fact, that's the direction that we want to go. I mean, we know we don't own the facility, and there's continual discussion on how that would progress, in terms of responsibility and all that. I know it's the township's responsibility. We hold the lease on the facility, but I think at some point we have to make a decision. Are we going to jump in with 2 feet, replace the roof, and do what's needed for the facility? Or is that a different discussion? Obviously that would involve the school district. And I know we have Andrew here tonight, so I don't want to get into any battles on it. That's not what I'm looking to do. I'm not looking to pick any fights, because at the end of the day, it is a facility that services the community. And our department is right in the middle of that every day, making sure people get to experience the facility. But we know there's a lot of needs that need to go into the building in order to get it where it has to be.
You're very diplomatic, Tammy.
I'm trying to be. I did have a structural assessment done on one of the roofs, the back roof structure, which is the one that has been in the worst shape. I haven't gotten the report back yet, so feel like I'm on a cliffhanger waiting for that. But we wanted to try and get an understanding of exactly how that roof is doing. Is it you know, is there something we need to be concerned about? Just given that we know these discussions are going to take place further into 2022. This isn't money that's going to be allocated tomorrow. And it certainly wouldn't be money that, it certainly wouldn't be a project that uses that $374,000 in the park impact fee, because that just wouldn't align with what's there. So I just would say, you know, go back, take a look at the meeting, watch the meeting, and I believe there's going to be more discussions to come with this board as we turn into the new year. Sean, I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, you're very diplomatic, so I will. No, it's the gym is going to be tough, but I think that there's certain things to punt and kick that can down the road. For lack of a better term, I think that we should be focusing on Odorriceo or Fenimore is probably the best use right now, and it'll have to be a discussion for another day and probably another budget, to be honest with you. I wish I could say anything more, but that's, you know, I mean, if Andrew, if you want to chime in, but that's kind of where my feelings, that's my personal feelings. Obviously I'm one of seven, so it is what it is.
The phrase "let sleeping dogs lie" comes to mind, but at the same time, I mean, for anyone watching, the way to sum it up is that an agreement between the school board and the township was made a long time ago that you know, the conditions of which you know, haven't aged too well, I think. Let's put it that way. So there's some negotiation to be done. So we'll leave it at that. I'm sure we can figure something out.
Maybe there
I
could be
guess
a
our
2 for
people will talk to your people, and we'll.
I was gonna say maybe we get 2-for-1 feasibility, because that sitting here, it just seems like good money after bad. Sorry.
I'd just like to say too, Jake Abel did send us an email, sent me and I think it was Claire, an email that he wants to get started with the push for Odorriceo Park in December. So just like we met, I guess, a couple months back at the RTCA Center, he wanted to know if that was available. So I told him anytime, whenever he gets, you know, the letter or the notifications out, it's available to him, you know, at a moment's notice. So I'm just waiting to have those discussions so that we can start to, I guess, move forward on Odorriceo Park.
And that's number one. Certainly, Howard, to the extent that meeting is set up, share that with us, and because I know some of us would, I know I would like to be there again for that kind of meeting. It's an important project to me as well. And secondly, that's an item which is going to appear on our agenda, if not in December, I think maybe in January. It's something that, for a variety of reasons, is not being put on the agenda tonight, but that is not going to fall off the radar screen of this board, I guarantee, especially with any number of us clamoring for it all the time. So thanks for that update as well. But that certainly relates to capital budget issues as well. Any more comments on capital budget? All right. Our next item is a 2-barrel Odorriceo and Cowan basketball court renovation projects. I think in October we had an update. I'm not sure if anything's changed since October, but Tammy.
We had a pre-bid meeting on the 10th, so that was good. Although only one contractor attended, but we know we've gotten a lot of questions and inquiries from a number. I think there was like 8+ in our pen bid system. So we're hopeful that we get a good fair amount of bids. Bids are due on the 30th, and then we'll take a look at those, and you know, barring any major issues or concerns, hopefully we can go to the board on the 13th, meeting the Board of Commissioners, to award. And then that'll put us in a situation where we can start to get working on those projects as early as possible in the spring.
Great. Thank you for that update. Any more comments on our basketball courts? Odorizio and Callan from the board? All right. We've heard our best friend in a couple of locations today barking away. So that's our next item. Dogs in the the Willows. Mary, I'll let you have the baton on this one again.
Oh, goody.
I will add just parenthetically before I do that. I've received a couple emails sort of raising concerns about dogs since our last meeting, which is, I think we all try to keep ourselves informed as to the communications we're hearing on all sides of that issue. And that's the only input I've received since the last meeting. But
yeah, I was going to ask if anybody like Tammy or Bill or anybody else had received any further input. I haven't, and haven't really done much on this matter. What I had hoped for was, I wouldn't want to say at the Fenimore Park level, but a meeting where we could dedicate, a serious amount of time to really eliciting input from the community, because I believe it's there and I believe it's going to be very polarized. I think there's going to be one side and another side. And I want to hear it all. We should all want to hear it all before we make any sort of recommendation on what we think should be done. But Tammy, I don't know if you've been getting any communications from the community.
I haven't since the last ones I've forwarded around to you guys. But one thing I will say is I've been having some, other topic meetings with Will Nord, the executive director at the WPP, as you know, Mary. And so the discussion that he and I had is that, so there's some concerns that linger, obviously, with the WPP as their events continue to increase. And I know I guess there have been concerns because people take their bags of dog doo and they throw them in the dumpsters. So that's something that we want to take a look at and figure out some ways to deter. And then I understand that there was an event that was going on in the solarium, and a dog ran into the solarium, up to the building, into the solarium. And, although it sounds like it was more of a friendlier dog, which was a good thing, but it was
Yes.
a very friendly dog, and it could have been an unfriendly dog, and it could have been a bad situation. So
Yeah.
I had mentioned to Will that I wanted to get together to have a meeting with he and Rick Foster and anyone else from the WPP who would maybe want to have a chat, and maybe as a temporary measure, we look to put some signage in place, because dogs are not permitted in the Willows proper. We obviously make a concession at the parking lot, at the trailhead, but as we know, there are dogs all through the park in all the areas, in the picnic areas, in the Skunk Hollow areas, the areas in and around the mansion. And maybe there's some, I'm not a big fan of signage, and I hate having the conversation about signage, but maybe some signs coming out of Skunk Hollow when you walk towards where the dumpsters are there to your left. Maybe we need to put some signs there. Maybe we need to put some signs down below where the community garden is located, and just start that process of maybe more containment of the dogs to the parking lot and the trailhead, which again, that's initially the goal, is to keep folks over there. But as you know, the trails come from the different areas, so people walk with their dogs from the different areas depending on which
Yes, they
trail they
do.
get off at. So we did have that discussion, just since it's a current policy. So for us to sign it and try and better provide instruction relative to it, is not like we're acting outside policy or code or anything like that. And then the other thing was just to try to start putting some informational messages up in the kiosks so people know, like, as soon as we get our schedule for 2022 of the Parks Board meetings, start to get that out there and encourage people to come and give feedback. We're having this active conversation with regards to dogs in the park and dogs in the Willows. Maybe keep it high level and just encourage people, submit an email if you have comments or suggestions, send it to me, send it to the Parks Board, and give an email address, or attend any of these meetings at 6:30 p.m., second Thursday of each month, kind of a thing, and actually put the schedule out there. So I think those were just some sort of stopgap measures to try to put into place until we figure out how we want to go, when we want to have a dedicated meeting, what that topic would entail, etc.
Yeah, I think we do need to have something in the form of a dedicated meeting, because I think we really need to focus people's attention. I'm not really anxious to have it compete with the Fenimore issue right now. That seems to be more of an acute issue. The dog issue is a chronic issue. Not that it doesn't need to be dealt with, but I do think we're going to need something of that nature to bring it to a head, so that we then know, then we can start to think about how we want to proceed. Do we want to think about ordinance changes? What do we think we need to do? So that's
Mary?
where I am on that issue. Yeah.
Mayor, can I just make a suggestion? I think those field trips are great that we did. And I mean, we're headed to the darkest day of the year coming up real soon. So I think once we knock that, as you said, this Fenimore issue down, let's do a field trip April, May, when it's a little bit nicer out. I'm happy to go there 5, 6 o'clock, see these dogs running around, see the people, talk to the people, and kind of be a little bit more hands-on. One day doesn't make a trend, as I typically say, but at least, we can all see it with our own eyes. And I think we'll really be able to have a better, at least I will be able to have a better grasp of it. I know that, you deal a lot with the willows and shade tree and you're there a lot, but for me, it's, if I went to a dog park, it would be, what's the one on Gulf Creek, Tammy? I'm trying to blank.
Hartford Park?
Yes, I would go to Hartford, but I've never taken my dog. But so I think maybe you're right. When it's a little bit nicer and Fenimore's done, let's try to tackle that.
If I could just, I was gonna say, if I could just bring up a comment. So, and this is something that I know Mary and I have talked about, but I'm an avid Nextdoor reader. I forward things to Tammy all the time. People complain or do whatever. I try to get it to her because I'm like, she may not get it. Anyway, someone posted a week ago that a number of people at the Rose Tree Park in Media received tickets for not having their dog leashed. And people posted about this. Well, today, even now, there's 240 comments. So I downloaded that and I'm going to try to tabulate it for us, because I think it's like phenomenal. I mean, just reading the comments would give us some of the stuff that I think we need. So what my goal is to try and do is for us to gather some data between now and the springtime, so that I can give it back to the board to say like, hey, because I mean, Media is like right next door, right? And Rose Tree Park is a big park. And you should hear, I mean, one person though put it best. He said, it's fine if you don't have your dog leashed, it's fine until it's not fine. And I'm like, love it. Like, it's fine until something happens. And then, because I mean, I eat lunch at Clemacrone sometimes during the week in the work, just to get a break. And I can't tell you, there are at least 3 to 4 dogs during lunchtime unleashed that are at that park. Now, it's not during when the kids are there, and it's not, you may not look at it as a big deal, but it's like the one for all. Like, if we don't allow dogs at Clemacrone and the Willows, then we don't allow dogs. But I don't know what to tell them. So anyway, I'm taking it upon myself just to take some of this data, 240 comments, and just kind of tabulate it for us and get it back to the board to say, like, here's some interesting recent insight of how people look at the leash law, because there are some very interesting opinions. So
that would be really, really helpful, because I think that could give us an idea what we can expect.
Right. So if anybody has any ideas, like, I'm a data-driven person, so I think you need that in order to make some decisions. Yeah. So I'm gonna try between now and like the winter to try to get us some information and have it so that we can all look at it and evaluate and say like, hey, here. So if anybody has any places they want me to look, Mary and I have talked about looking at places where they have the laws and they have like Haverford Reserve, but the Rose Tree comments are fascinating and they're current. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there. So I'll do that, and whatever else anybody has any ideas, but I think the more data we have, the better we can make some decisions. Yeah.
Great.
So,
God, that's great, Christina. Thanks.
Sure.
I'm sure some of them are pretty funny too, right?
Oh, I'll bet.
If I'm having a bad day, I'll read a couple of them, huh?
That's right.
It's some of them are like, hey, if you get bit, you get bit. I'm like,
one of those comments actually was someone complaining about issues at Tennell.
I saw that.
Yeah.
But like, if you, I can actually find a way. I downloaded them, and then I can actually put them into some kind of way and then I could search them by just their words. So I was able to do that. And I'm going like, so you guys will find it fascinating, but it's just, we can at least use some data points to it and say like, hey, this is, but yeah, it's interesting. People are like, hey, get big, get big. So anyway, that's all. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks,
No, that would be
Christina.
really helpful. Thanks, Christina. That's great.
Yeah.
Any more comments on what we just started shorthand refer to as dogs? All right, our last item.
You're muted, Bill. Bill, if you can hear me, you're
Sorry,
muted.
I'm unmuted now. Sorry about that. Thanks, Christina. Our last item is Park Playground Communication Board update. Tammy.
Yeah, so, well, first of all, before that, I just wanted to give the quick update about Cowan Park and the transfer bridge. So it was item D. It is on back order. Everybody can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. So that item is on back order. It's been delayed yet another several weeks. So we're just right now waiting for it, and hopefully we can get it in before the end of the year. But as far as the playground communication boards, that's the project that I'm still working on. I actually started to develop the board in detail, and I had a meeting with Marcella Gibbons, who was the resident that came to visit us at our meeting back in July, I believe was when that was presented. And she and I went through the list of preferred icons. There's certain icons that go with certain words that don't, and the system gives you like a lot of different options. So if you have like somebody saying no, you could have like different different visuals for that. You know, you could have like a circle with an X, you could have, somebody saying, no with their hands up. So we went through and we started to sift through those on what words were the appropriate words. And then of course we went through and there's like a structure for how certain words need to go into categories and how they're arranged on the signboard. And then we started to kind of like whittle those down to a number, which is about 60 to 70 icons. So right now, like I'm trying to get that refined, and then that will become the basis on what we develop the sign out of. So it's been, step-by-step procedure. Again, these symbols are, they're proprietary to a company by the name of N2Y, and then they have this software program that's called Symbol Sticks Prime. So we had to get the licensing, get access. Then there were some, structural pieces within it we needed to access that we had to get technical support on. And now that just developing that board within that software system. So it's just taking a little bit of extra time, but I'm making progress. And, hopefully by the beginning of the year, we can get some more headway on that. I apologize, it's taken long, but it's one of those things. It's just kind of, I hate to say it, but it's just not in my foreground. Honestly, every time
Why
I get
not?
started,
Come on.
every time I get started on it, I end up on 10 other things that are eminent. So unfortunately, I haven't made as much headway on it as I hoped, but not because I haven't tried.
Well, thanks for your
You
efforts.
do a lot, Tammy.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, we don't have new business, and we customarily do end with public participation. I do see we have one attendee, and in the event that individual wants to have a public comment before we close the meeting, I'll allow that to happen if he or she wishes to raise a hand. All right. Don't see a hand raised, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second. And all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Earned. And we'll see you folks on December 9th, if not sooner, on the back of the fire truck for Santa.
Thanks, Bill.
Night,
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Good night.
everybody.
Everybody.
Hey,
Good
well,
night.
nice Thanksgiving.